Good evening, Skull Nation. It's Mike on the Vikes. Hi, my name is Josh. Welcome aboard at JLime8, as you can see on X. You can find me on Facebook, Mike on the Vikes. You can find me on MikeOnTheVikes.com, where there hasn't been a lot of writing recently. But anyway, appreciate anyone for tuning in. This is episode 19 of the podcast. We're going to switch to season 2 once the official next season starts. So we're about a month away from that. But tonight's focus is going to be on our two running backs, and that's Ty Chandler and Aaron Jones. Obviously, Aaron Jones is the new exciting guy in from Green Bay. Love taking a guy away from Green Bay. And I kind of want to talk about how I think they should be utilized in terms of like usage and things like that. But I'll get into more of that in a second. Again, this is a slow season for news. There's not a whole lot of things going on aside from hype about just getting really excited about the new season, right? Everybody at training camp is doing well. Everybody is locked in. I mean, everything you hear the guys say just gets you all hopeful for the season, right? JJ McCarthy is saying everything that you would hope he would say. I saw a little bit earlier today that Cam Bynum has said, "Why not us in the Super Bowl?" Right? He's looking around at his guys. He's saying, "Why, looking around, this is a championship team to him," and that's how you want your players to think. That's how us fans like to think, even if we know deep down that the odds aren't particularly great for us this year. You like to see that level of positivity heading into the new season. So anyway, before we get to the Ty Chandler, Aaron Jones discussion, Vikings.com did a 10 takeaways item. I thought it did a nice job of kind of summing up some things you could take away from the mini camp and the OTAs and things like that. But for me, out of all those 10, I picked out the 3 that are most relevant in my opinion. And the first one is that Ivan Pace could get the green dot. I've talked on this podcast about Ivan Pace, about our linebacking room, and it seems to be that Ivan Pace Jr. and Blake Cashman are getting the starting reps at linebacker, which love to see that. I love that Ivan Pace is taking the next step. And he remained humble about it. He said, if the green dot comes to me, if that's what the team thinks, then I'm all for it. I'm ready for it, but I don't need to be the one. I know there are more guys here with more experience and things like that. But that's a good sign because he had a breakout year last year as an undrafted free agent, and if he has taken another step, that's awesome. That's really exciting. And of course, Blake Cashman, the new signee, love that he's fitting in right in there as a starting linebacker, and I'm starting to feel really good about the linebacking room. So hopefully that's as solid as I feel it is as we head into training camp and then eventually into the regular season. The other thing I wanted to point out is that Jordan Addison looks like he's improved, which is awesome. I mean, we were all blown away last year with his early off-season toe drag catches, and then he did a few of them in the season. The dude is awesome. He was awesome last year. The fact that he's gotten better and he has a year of experience under his belt, I just think that this is a great situation, and we should be ready to tell by the end of the year, assuming McCarthy gets some first-team reps. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe Darnold plays great all year, and because of the situation he's in, and there's no reason to take him out, right? But I would expect to see McCarthy at some point this year, and if we do, what a great receiving core to learn with and to grow alongside of. And so I think we only should have optimism regarding Jordan Addison. The thing I like the most is he was interviewed and he was talked about. He was asking about areas of his game that he's improving on. He's talking about his get off. He's talking about being decisive off the line of scrimmage and getting into his routes. And I love that. That's a detail. That's a fine-tuned thing that, it kind of marks the maturity of a player who's no longer a rookie, right? As a rookie, you get out there, you're just trying to probably make sure you don't screw up, make sure you don't drop the balls that come your way, things like that. And so now he's looking into the more detailed nuances of the game. And if he gets better at getting open, I mean, what are defenses going to do, right? If you're going to double Jefferson, Addison's going to beat you. Hawkinson up the middle is going to beat you. Like this is a great setup we have offensively, especially if Addison has in fact improved. And then the third and final takeaway that I made an audible sound as I was reading an article by myself in my basement, and that is that we have a plan at cornerback. We have an actual plan at corner. And I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying it's going to work, and I'm not saying we're set to go and we have an elite secondary. But I like that we have a game plan. And that game plan seems to be that the guy we brought in, Shaq Griffin, is going to slot in on one side. Mekhi Blackman, second-year player, will be on the other outside corner spot. And it sounds like Byron Murphy's going to slide more into the slot, which is a better, more natural position for him. All of that sounds amazing. I love that. Now, does that convince me that it's going to be perfect? Does that convince me that, our corners are going to be start them, set them, forget them, and they're going to be great all year? Not necessarily, right? I still think we're lacking in the depth department. I still think we have too many unknowns for guys that have been here for multiple years. We obviously have Kyrie Jackson, the draft pick we don't know about. We have a Caleb Evans who's kind of been up and down in terms of development. We have, Jay Ward, who flashed on special teams last year. What's he going to be? Andrew Booth, is he going to be a factor? Lewis Saint. There are so many different guys that I don't know if we're going to have any depth. And Shaq Griffin has been a solid player in the NFL. He is not necessarily a young player, right? And so I'm worried that one little ding, one little injury on the outside, and if we have to move Byron Murphy back out, if he's doing well in the slot, things like that. So I'm still worried about our depth. But I like that they have a plan. I like to have a place they're going to start and they're going to feel good about. And according to Cam Bynum, we have too much talent. And he's my guy, so I'm going to take his word. We have too much talent. We don't know how we're going to get all these guys on the field. And if that's indeed the case, then we're sitting pretty. But I'm still remaining skeptical about our cornerback room, but I like that we have a plan. I like that we have players that we like in the positions that they're going to be best suited for. And again, with returning Brian Flores, I think that makes a huge difference. So those were the three that stood out to me. It's a good article. There's a lot of good takeaways. And if you are someone that doesn't really follow a lot of football at this time of year, because it's like, why would we follow football? There's other things going on in our lives, exactly. I would hop on over to Vikings.com and take a look at that 10 takeaways article. There's a good summation of things that you could remember from this mini camp OTA session. And then, obviously we're about a month away from training camp, and that's when things really will get ramped up, and the hype trains will leave the station, stopping for nothing, right? Basically. So anyway, the focus of the actual podcast episode tonight is Ty Chandler, quote unquote, versus Aaron Jones. Now I say that with air quotes because I'm not actually pitting them against each other. I don't think there is a starter debate necessarily. I think you bring in a guy like Aaron Jones who's proven. I think you give him the nod at starter. I think that's fine. Now I personally would prefer it to be Ty Chandler. I'm going to explain a few things along the way. That's why I think that. But I don't think that necessarily matters. What I'm worried about is depth and things like that, and I kind of want to temper my expectations, because as Vikings fans, we hear from Packer fans, on our neighbors or friends or Packer fans, we hear about how great Aaron Jones is, and we watch him score against us and dominate against us. And so when we see him in purple, we immediately think, okay, boom, he's going to be the guy that takes us there. And I want us to hold our horses a little bit with the Aaron Jones hype, just because, is he a great player? Yes. Has he been a great player? Yes. But is he getting older? Yes. Is he someone who only played 11 games last year? Yes. After an injury that didn't look particularly minor, right? It was a knee injury, And so I don't know what the Packers' decision processes were, anything like that. But his usage wasn't super high until the end of the season, and we'll get into that in a little bit later. And I think that while there should be a lot of excitement surrounding Aaron Jones, while we should be happy he's here and welcome his contributions to us over here in purple, I don't want us to think that he's going to be this workhorse, get every carry, run the ball 20 times a game, and lead us to the playoffs on his back. I don't think that's where you want to go. And again, this is the season of hype, so I think a lot of people are thinking, like, we got a huge boost in that room, right? Because Madison kind of had a down year last year. Chandler's still a little bit of a guy, still needs to prove himself to an extent, but so when I say Ty Chandler, quote-unquote, versus Aaron Jones, I'm just kind of looking at both of them going into this season and kind of what I'd like to see. That's where this podcast is going to go. So thanks for being here, as per usual. This is Mike on the Vikes. So again, I'm not actually calling this a competition. I phrased it in air quotes again. We all know they're going to share duties, right? This is the NFL, the modern NFL. We think of the top running backs in the league. If you look at their carries, there's very few bell cow, workhorse, whatever you want to call them. There's very few guys that play third downs all the time. There's a lot of guys that can, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of guys that would be capable of it, but because the shelf life of a running back in the NFL is so short, teams are more and more embracing the committee and saying, hey, if this guy can pass protect well enough, if this guy can catch the ball well enough out of the backfield, he's going to get some touches so that our star running back can get a breather, can preserve himself for the playoffs, assuming we get there, right? And so, when we look at Aaron Jones, he's just under 30 years old. However, he did average 4.6 yards per attempt last year. Oh, I have numbers for you. Again, welcome to Low Budget Mike on the Vikes. Ooh, look at that. Look at that stat reappear. Podcast people, sorry, you really got to check it out on YouTube to see the excitement. I'm just kidding, of course. Aaron Jones had 4.6 yards per attempt last year. He had about 70% catch percentage, which is good because he gets thrown to a lot. And so he's reliable out of the backfield. He's efficient as a runner, and that's exactly where the source of all this hype is, okay? The thing that kind of stood out to me, though, with Aaron Jones, I was a little worried about is that, he was inactive for 6 games last year, and I think it's mainly due to injury. But in the 7 games that he did play, that he only had more than 10 carries twice. Like, I don't know if the Packers were specifically preserving him. I don't know if it was because their offense was young and exciting and pass heavy, and maybe they were trailing and needed to keep up. I'd have to go back and watch a ton of the film. But Aaron Jones wasn't really used, and then all of a sudden, in the playoff run, he had 20 carries against the Rams in Week 8 and 13 against the Steelers in Week 9. And both of those were really inefficient performances. The Rams, kind of a weird one for me. I don't think the run defense was especially dominant last year, but the Steelers definitely have a great defense, and so it's not like a big deal that against them he only had 13 carries for 50 plus yards. But those are 2 games he had 13 carries and 20 carries in those 2 games I mentioned. Week 8 against the Rams, week 9 against the Steelers. All of his other carry counts are under 10 in the games he was active until you get to the final 5 games of the season. So the last 3 games of the regular season and the 2 games of the postseason, he had a minimum of 18 carries. And 4 of those 5 games he had over 20 or more carries. And in all 5 of those games he ran for over 100 yards. So obviously the good news is there that he ran for over 100 yards. He finished with a great efficiency rating, and he obviously is still effective at his age, which pushing 30 for running back is getting up there, right? But the reason I'm highlighting those numbers from Aaron Jones is because I kind of want us to start the season leaning a little bit more on Ty Chandler. I don't know if the Packers did it to preserve injury or to protect him or whatever, but a 30-year-old running back who had a knee injury last year, who missed 6 games, that to me is a sign that let's not, yeah, sure, if you want to start him in week 1 as the starting running back, get him some reps, I totally get it. But I want to see a pretty even split here, personally. And I don't know if people, and maybe everyone else thinks that, and I'm just missing it, but judging by some of the hype I see online and some of the excitement for Aaron Jones, I think people are picturing him to come in, be RB1, get 20 carries a game, while Ty Chandler just spells him, on a series here or there, or maybe on third downs here or there. And I don't think that's the right maneuver, right? Yeah, obviously we need to get to the playoffs. I'm not saying the Vikings are a team where we can start every game and start the season just thinking, well, we're just going to coast until we get to playoffs. We're obviously not in that position. That being said, I do think we need to make sure we remember this is a committee, because Ty Chandler really came on last year. And so let's talk about him for a second, because this is, I don't know why I'm all about the air quotes tonight, but this is, Josh, you were wrong about him last year, so maybe that's why I'm so high on the Ty Chandler hype train this offseason. But, when he came into the league, if you had watched his North Carolina highlights, you would have seen a guy who was electric in the open field because he was always in the open field. And then when he gets to the pros, you're wondering why he doesn't get as much run initially, and it's because, well, his pass blocking wasn't particularly great, and he wasn't proven or developed enough in the area of, being patient, making some cuts, and having vision at the line. And I actually talked about that in one of the articles I wrote for Bite Size Vikes. We were talking about Alexander Madison and Ty Chandler, and because when you saw him at UNC, he was either catching a pass in the open field, which he was great at doing, or he was making one cut after receiving a handoff and running through a gaping hole. And if he has that opportunity, he's a home run threat every play, absolutely. But in the NFL, you need to be a little bit more nuanced on that. And so I was doing a little research. I was checking up with some people who I follow as Vikings writers. I watched a decent chunk of the All-22 of the Cincinnati game last year, where in Week 15, Ty Chandler had 23 carries, I believe, and had over 100 yards. And his vision has definitely improved. His pass blocking has definitely improved, and I think he did take that big step in development last year, which is why, again, while yes, it's exciting that Aaron Jones is here, I want to make sure we don't forget that we have Ty Chandler and that they should kind of be more viewed as a 1A, 1B instead of a 1 and a 2, right? I know that from a career standpoint and from a talent standpoint, sure, Aaron Jones better. I'm not saying he's not. But I don't think the gap is such that we just avoid Ty Chandler. And maybe that's not even going to happen. This is just, these are off-season thoughts by Mike on the Vikes. I just think that I think both running backs should get some run. And I wouldn't even be upset if we roll out, this is Ty Chandler's got a little bit more experience with Kevin O'Connell. Why not run him out there as RB1? And then, if Aaron Jones is your more like, quote unquote, backup threat, like you're going to be sitting pretty on offense, assuming things go to plan and Ty Chandler keeps developing. Now, some people might say, well, Josh, look at your own screen right now. And for podcasting folks, on my screen I have Ty Chandler and Aaron Jones, 4.5 yards per attempt for Ty Chandler, 4.6 yards per attempt for Aaron Jones, obviously the same. But I also have their PFF pass blocking grades up there. And Ty Chandler's last year was 49.3. Aaron Jones last year was 63.2. And if you look at the game-by-game breakdowns, I'm not going to go through all of it. That would get a little bit too stat nerdy, a little bit too into the weeds. But not only was Aaron Jones better, he was more consistent. But pointing out that Cincinnati game, Ty Chandler had an 84.5 pass blocking grade, according to PFF, and that's in the game where he was on the field most of the time. So whether or not he can do that constantly, I'm not saying that one game makes him a great pass blocking back forever. What I'm saying is we know he's capable of that. And so if you know a guy is capable of that, there's no reason to bench him for that. There's no reason to limit his usage because of that. And so I guess what I'm saying here, because Aaron Jones is proven. He's been on the field long enough. He's, if you know anything about PFF, in the 70s and low 80s, your grades are going to be a nice color green, and that's nice to look at. For Aaron Jones, almost all of his games from a pass blocking standpoint are in that green, mostly in the high 70s. And then he had a couple duds, probably due to injury and lack of time and game script, that kind of sent his overall rating down to 63.2. But I think Aaron Jones is a proven solid pass blocking back, and so that's what we want Ty Chandler to get to. But again, if I reference that Cincinnati game, it's just kind of, that's where my head was at before I was doing this podcast. I was kind of looking at that Vikings game against Cincinnati, probably because I'm still mad. I think the episode that I talked about that game as a recap, I was saying I'm still mad about the Bengals loss because, it was Jake Browning versus Nick Mullins, and Mullins had 4 interceptions. If he has one less interception, we win that game. If we have a little bit more tenacity, Caleb Evans, closed circuit, against T. Higgins, we stop one of their touchdowns, we win that game. Like, that was a game we should have won. We were 7-6, I believe, at the time. That should have been, or right around there. But it was one of those games where we should have really solidified ourselves as the wild card, and instead we kept putting ourselves in a harder, or lower and lower probability of making the playoffs. Anyway, last year's last year. We've moved on. We're optimistic here at Mike on the Vikes, so I'm not going to talk about the Bengals game from that standpoint. But from a Ty Chandler standpoint, he was great in that game. Tyler Fornes, I've mentioned this before, he writes for the USA Today Vikings Wire. He broke down a lot of the Ty Chandler plays that you'll see if you were to go back and watch that, and he looked great. He looked every bit the RB1 that you would want for your team. And so, you're wondering, okay, what's this discussion really for? Like, no one hates Ty Chandler, no one hates Aaron Jones, no one's saying we shouldn't use both. I was starting to get vibes that it was going to be Aaron Jones' team on his back. He was going to carry us there. I'm like, wait a second, let's just pump the brakes a little bit. Let's calm down. We have 2 guys here. We have no depth. Kene Nwangwu, Dwayne McBride, Myles Gaskin, those are the other names in the running back room. Do we want any of them to really get significant snap percentages? Probably not. And so I'm saying let's maximize the efficiency of our top 2 here by really being strategic. And while that seems to make obvious sense, if you are someone who sees Aaron Jones coming in here and then you watch games and he's going to be, where's Aaron Jones? There's going to be a lot of Ty Chandler here. I don't want you to panic. I'm hoping that's because we found 2 guys that we can count on in pass protection, that we can count on to be efficient runners, catchers out of the backfield. They're both great catchers out of the backfield, and they're both proven runners. Ty Chandler, assuming he doesn't completely implode this year, I would assume then he would have another year to back up last year's performance as an efficient runner. And then I think we're just looking at two good running backs. So let's not immediately cast Ty Chandler into the minimal usage department, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Let's make sure they're more of a 50-50 split is I guess what I'm advocating for here. And I would almost even say things like, let's roll Ty Chandler out there week 1 as the starter, right? Let other teams second guess, wonder what's going on with Aaron Jones. Why is he on the field? Put them both out there. Do a shotgun with Darnold and put one on either side. Have them both go out for routes on a play. Have one do a play action. Hand them off to both of them. Like, get creative. I think Kevin O'Connell can do that. And I'm really excited about both of these running backs. I just want to make sure that we know that Ty Chandler has quote-unquote rectified. If I say quote-unquote again, I'm sorry. If you're listening to this or watching this, I'm sure that's really annoying. I hate when people repeat the same thing over and over again. So my sincere apologies. But and see, now I don't even know what I was gonna say with that. But Ty Chandler has improved on the main knocks on him as a draft prospect, which was pass protection. And did he have the NFL level vision, right? Can he do more than just cut into the open space and go, right? And I think that Cincinnati game was a really good piece of evidence that says, hey, he can be patient. He can follow his lead blockers. He can go where the hole opens up. He can adapt if where the hole's supposed to open up, there's just a jumble of bodies, but he finds a seam, off to the right or off to the left. He can make that cut. He's obviously got the speed and the talent to do that. And so, again, season of optimism. There's no reason to not be optimistic here. I think our only worry in our running back room is an Aaron Jones injury, for example, which is, again, another reason why this, to me, should be a 50-50 split. This, to me, should be I'd love to see him on the field at the same time, here and there, not constantly. I want other teams to not really know who our starter is, right? I would love for every game them each to get 8 to 11 carries, somewhere in that realm, and then a handful of others to other players, sure. Something like that where we're not completely banking on Aaron Jones, because while he has been great and is great, and I hope he will be great, and I think he can contribute for us, he's getting old for running back. We don't want to put all the pressure on him initially and then wear him into the ground or aggravate that knee injury that, again, looked worse than it ended up being. And so I'm not a doctor. I'm not a physical trainer or any sort of person that would know anything about that injury. I'm just I'm a little worried about the injury side of things. So that's kind of where my head's at with our running backs. I think a lot of optimism, but when you look on that screen, you see Ty Chandler's pass blocking grade is 49.3, and that's terrible. It was a lot of fluctuation, a lot of games where he wasn't the starter, and so if you only have a handful of opportunities, your percentages are going to be thrown off really easily. And so I think that he's shown me enough that he's gotten enough better. He's gotten better enough to be on the field. So anyway, that's where we're going with that. And now, because it's also, while it's the season of no news or nothing exciting really, this is also the season of fantasy drafts. And if you are a fantasy buff like I am, you are also maybe listening to podcasts, watching YouTube videos specifically about your players on your fantasy team and trade values and things like that. It's a very exciting season for you year-round dynasty fantasy folks out there, myself included. And so I thought, well, I have two guys here who should be considered for fantasy. And so here's another fancy little diagram, it's not even a diagram. Podcast people, don't go to YouTube to see this diagram. It's just a text box. But anyway, I was like, as I was looking at Aaron Jones and Ty Chandler here, I was like, okay, so from a fantasy standpoint, is there really the same amount of hype for Aaron Jones over Ty Chandler? And the answer is yes. And again, it's obvious. Aaron Jones is brought in. You pay him the 2-year deal. He's way more proven than Ty Chandler. He's obviously going to be the RB1 in everyone's minds, okay? No, Kevin O'Connell's not going to find my podcast and decide to say, oh, well, that's a good point, Josh. We should do more with Ty Chandler. And so these are my thoughts, obviously. But from an ADP standpoint, these are numbers from Fantasy Pros as of yesterday, I believe. A couple days ago. and this is just redraft. I'm not going to go into dynasty implications because Aaron Jones is almost 30, Ty Chandler's in his mid-20s. Obviously, that's a huge difference for running backs, so we're not going to look at that sort of thing. But for redraft leagues, Aaron Jones is currently RB18. He's the 18th running back off the board, which is good for about 81st overall if you're in a standard 12-team league. Ty Chandler's RB46, and that's 140th overall. And so there's a huge disparity, and so the fantasy community seems to think that Aaron Jones is going to get much more production, much more opportunities, and that could very well be right. That is good logic. You bring in Aaron Jones, if he's fully healthy, you probably want him on the field. You probably want him getting more reps. Again, don't take my opinion on it to change any of your drafting stream. This is not fantasy advice, folks, so keep that in mind. But when I look at that, because I understand the disparity, and I understand why Aaron Jones is taken as an RB18. That puts him as a solid RB2. You feel comfortable starting him on a week-to-week basis. But that puts you at drafting him in round 6 or 7. So depending on the team that you're putting together, if you are doing a redraft league, that's about round 6 or 7, give or take, pick 81, where you would be finding Aaron Jones. And that means you might have to reach a little bit depending on your league. You might be able to wait a little bit depending on your league. And so if you're at all doubting or feeling a little bit about his injury, or you're like, I got decent running backs, I don't need to stretch or reach for one here, I would say, again, just don't forget about Ty Chandler, because you can have him 3 rounds later, basically, around 10-ish, give or take, 10, 11, maybe late round 9. You're taking Ty Chandler, and that at that value, you're already pretty much near your dart throw players anyway, depending on the type of league you're in, and so why not? Our offense, unless we have completely inept quarterback play, which I suppose is, there is that fear for Vikings fans going into this season, right? Sam Darnold maybe literally has nothing that he can offer an NFL team, and that's why he's in this spot, and it's his last China chance. And J.J. McCarthy comes in and really struggles as a rookie. Those are both possible, possible scenarios. But I think more likely is you have an offense that probably makes some mistakes, but also moves the ball, right? Because you have Kevin O'Connell calling the plays. You have an elite receiver core. When T.J. Hawkinson comes back, it's even better. You have these 2 great running backs we're talking about, and we have, quarterbacks that can sling it. So even if they make mistakes, they should theoretically still be putting up numbers. And so I don't think it's a bad shout to take Ty Chandler 3 or 4 rounds later than Aaron Jones, especially if you feel like where Jones is going to be available in your league is at reach. So just some food for thought. Again, this is not Mike on the Vikes fantasy advice. This is, hey, I talked about 2 running backs, and it's fantasy drafting season. So in case anybody is thinking about them from a fantasy standpoint, these are the current ADPs according to Fantasy Pros regarding Jones at RB18, Chandler at RB46. That's about a 3-ish round difference there. So take that for what it's worth. Because I think and I feel and I would, in my opinion, should be that Chandler would get, it shouldn't be like a 80-20 or even a 70-30 split from Jones to Chandler. I don't think it'll be 50-50 or anything like that, but I think closer to that, the better for the team, in my opinion. But, that's assuming that what I'm thinking about Ty Chandler going into this year is accurate, which, who knows. But, because it's still off-season time, we're not even into training camp, so a million things could change. The Vikings could bring in someone else, who knows? We could get another running back into the room. There could be an injury. You just never know. But as it stands, I like both our running backs. I'm excited what they can bring to the team. I love taking guys from the Packers, but let's hope it's not like a Dean Lowry situation where he didn't really pan out for us. Let's hope that Jones still has a couple years at his elite production levels. So anyway, that's all I got for you tonight. Thanks for listening. This is Mike on Vikes Podcast. Again, my name is Josh at JLime8 over on X, and then find me on Facebook or MikeOnTheVikes.com, or basically anywhere. Just come let me know. What do you think? What's your thought on the Vikings running back situation? What's in your head? Because that's how this, by the way, this is, I talked about this is low budget Mike on the Vikes. That's how the planning goes in. That's how I plan these episodes is, what am I thinking about Vikings related right now is basically it. And so I had the running backs on my mind. So hopefully that was worth your last half hour if you stuck around long enough to figure out that I can't talk anymore. So we're going to call it quits. Have a great weekend, folks. We are nearing the end of June. That means training camp football's around the bend. If you're in Minnesota, all you've seen is rain, so hopefully you're elsewhere seeing some sunshine. If not, hang in there. Better times are ahead. Thanks